welcome to Whovian Espresso. So, Series 11 has come and been quite quickly, as seasons go. It's been one of the shortest ones. It is the shortest season of New Who. But has it lived up to the expectations that we had at the start of the season? Has it set itself out to be the big, brand new show that we were all expecting it to be? Has it resolved major issues I had coming in with previous seasons into this season? And how does it compare to other seasons? Also, what were my thoughts on all 10 episodes and ranking? Yes, this is going to be a long video. I'm also going to be talking about my positives, the meh things, and the negatives of this season before giving this season a final score out of 100 and then simplified down to 10, which will give us a rough idea of how this season, in my opinion, would rank amongst the others. So yes, this video will be long, so grab yourself a snack or have some dinner or whatever. Get yourself ready for a long video because we've got a lot in store. I'm probably going to record this over several days, so I'm not aiming to get... as of recording this, my Series 11 finale review went up yesterday, so I did wait for that review to go up before filming this. But yeah. Pardon me. But yeah, this video will contain spoilers for all of 10 episodes of Season 11, so if you've not yet watched them, it is available to watch on BBC iPlayer for the next 11 months, believe it or not. I remember when it used to just be 7 days. 7 days on BBC iPlayer. I guess Netflix really has taken its toll on BBC iPlayer. However, the month of October was the best month for BBC iPlayer thanks to Doctor Who, so, you know, Doctor Who and Killing Eve. Killing Eve was top show and Doctor Who was second show. Just had to clarify that. To be fair though, Killing Eve was an iPlayer exclusive, and Doctor Who still had a bigger overall audience by the end of the month. But yeah, it is available to watch. All episodes are available to watch on BBC iPlayer and BBC America On Demand in the US. But yeah, spoilers from this point onwards. So to start off with, I'm going to be ranking the episodes, all 10 episodes of the Series 11 so far. I also have revised some of the scores. I don't think I have added a mark to any of these episodes, which I guess some people might see as a negative. Also, the order of this might not be as you're expecting it to be. I have put some episodes in order that, after rewatching them, I thought they deserve to go down a different place overall. This is technically a top 10 because there are 10 episodes, but yeah, sit back and enjoy it and we'll get on to number 10. In final place is The Tsuranga Conundrum. This is episode 5 of season 11. This was the midway point of the series. I've chosen this episode on a number of points. It is by far the weakest story, some of the worst dialogue of the series. Jodie Whittaker is at her most annoying in this episode, as in Matt Smith level annoying, and if you know me, you know how much I hate Matt Smith at the which is weird because he used to be one of my favourite doctors, but I have grown to have a distaste for his doctor. One of the positives of this episode was the Pating. I did think it was cute. A big Lilo and Stitch / Disney fan there, talking, I guess. But yeah, it had a nice, sleek, modern feel to it and some nice elements, but it just didn't make up for how poorly the writing was, the casting was, the dialogue was, the directing really. It just didn't click with me. I just did not like this episode at all, really. Also, although I liked the look of the Pating and thought it looked cute and so on, the concept was thoroughly unoriginal and felt like something we'd seen before. So I have revised this score for an even lower score. It was already at 3 out of 10. I have now lowered it to 2 out of 10 because when I tried to rewatch, it's just incredibly hard to rewatch. So I think you'll find a lot of these episodes I have removed points because they're just really hard to rewatch, which is a bad thing because a lot of these episodes I removed points for not being rewatchable, because that's one of the things about these scores is one of the things I would have taken away points or added points would have been depending on the rewatchability factor, because I think overall Jodie Whittaker's series of the Doctor has been incredibly unrewatchable, to put it bluntly. But yeah, this episode is just one of those ones we'll probably learn to just forget about over time. It's incredibly forgettable. But yeah. Anyway, so that was the Tsuranga Conundrum that came in place number 10. In place number 9, not too much of a surprise to many, I'm sure, is The Witchfinders, what I labelled as the most disappointing episode of the season. I think the place of disappointing has been won by another episode, just in terms of the nature of the episode and its position in the series. But this episode, I put it down as the most disappointing one because it was one of the ones I was most hyped for, given my enthusiasm for the time period. This is one of the few historicals that didn't deliver, I feel. I think they were all solid historicals, except this one. But yeah, The Witchfinders, I just didn't really click with it at all. Bad storytelling, bad dialogue. I rewatched it and didn't like Jodie's performance. It just wasn't good. Yaz felt sidelined, I didn't like her at all. Ryan and Graham even felt sidelined. Pretty much nothing happens to any of our main protagonists this series except the Doctor. It's one of those episodes that I probably knew was going to focus on the fact that her gender changed. It changed, yes, and they made a massive fuss out of this. Probably more fuss out of it in this episode than they had in any other episode of the season, including the premiere episode, which is a bit surprised because that's the episode that it's actually happened in. But yeah, did not really like this episode at all. The VFX weren't really good. And this is where I noticed on a rewatch that the music started to go downhill. I think towards the end of the series, it was still working at background level at this episode. It was nice to have a big background music. There's just one episode that really did bug me, that the music wasn't as big and epic and explosive as it had in previous years. But we'll get to that in a minute because it's not the next one on my list, but it's still quite close. It's coming up. But yeah, I did not enjoy this episode. Although I did find it easier to rewatch than most other episodes due to the fact that I was starting to find things I did like about it. The whole directing and the visual spectacle, like the location filming, started to click with me more. So I haven't removed a point. I haven't added anything either because it's still quite a horrific story. But yeah. So it still remains at a 3 out of 10. And number 8 is Arachnids in the UK. Not really much happened in this episode. I didn't really find much in this episode to like either. I guess the spiders were genuinely terrifying for me, particularly as an arachnophobic. But there's still not really any good story plot here. The dialogue is also very poor here, and 13 is incredibly annoying in this episode. You could really feel the annoyingness, I guess, brewing inside of her at this point, leaping into the next episode, which was, of course, the Tsuranga Conundrum, which I voted as my lowest episode of the season. You can really feel that things were not going to go well. The guest cast wasn't very good in this episode. When I rewatched it, I didn't feel as attached to the main villain. There were a lot of characters that were clearly just thrown in for the mix of things. Also a plotline that had been used 1,000,001 times in Classic Who beforehand. So I have demoted this episode, also because it wasn't very rewatchable, to 6 out of 10, which I believe is 1 less than I originally gave it. But yeah, Arachnids in the UK did not feel any levitation towards this one. And number 7 is... 7th place is The Ghost Monument. This was the 2nd episode of the series and is one of the most unrewatchable episodes of the season. It's very enjoyable on your first viewing, don't get me wrong. It's really fun to watch on your first viewing. It's a really nice, fast-paced action race space adventure, but it's just incredibly hard to rewatch. The cast is still good in this one. The guest cast is good. Sean Dooley. The companions are all good in this one, except Yaz, who still gets sidelined. Maybe the dialogue is a bit weak and the storyline is also a bit weak, but it wasn't. It was written by Chris Chibnall, so what did I expect, really? I think I was very lenient towards the start of the series because the showrunner's still finding his feet, but at the end of the series I know his content hasn't really matured since this point, and I was kind of hoping it would, so I have demoted this episode to, I was going to say a 6 out of 10, but yeah, I'm going to keep it a 6 out of 10. Mainly because it would ruin the whole top 10, because I'd have to put this episode below the Arachnids in the UK, which actually I still think is probably weaker than this episode. But yeah, it's not very good, if I'm honest, at all. It's very good on your first watch. It just isn't. It's one of the least rewatchable episodes. It's very forgettable, very filler, although I have felt that a lot of these episodes this season have felt like filler episodes, the one you just slam in between one two-parter and the next, which has not happened this series. We have not had a single two-parter, which is another flaw with this season, which I'll get onto in another point of the video. But yeah, The Ghost Monument, 6 out of 10, and number 6 is Woman Who Fell to Earth. Yes, the season premiere. This one is an interesting one. Again, I was more forgiving towards this episode because of the fact that it was the season premiere, the showrunner and Jodie and everyone were finding their feet in this episode. I have genuinely found that season premieres of new showrunners have been actually quite reasonably weak in terms of the rest of their era, because the showrunners are improving, they're finding their feet, they're showing what they can do with this project. And although I think the only person who hasn't had a problem with finding their feet in the season and became worse over time was Stephen Moffat, Russell T Davies was very much in my opinion, reasonably weak in his first couple of episodes, but you're more forgiving to him because he's finding his feet, and the stories are still far superior to this. It shows the differences in quality in terms of writing between Russell T Davies and Chris Chibnall, that this episode is 10 times per billion then times the amount that this episode is in terms of quality, because Rose is so much better of a story in my opinion. While it's not a perfect story, and I would rank it, I wouldn't rank it maybe not rank it a 10 out of 10, maybe I'd rank it a 9.5 or a 9 out of 10, but that's me being lenient to it. If I was honest, I'd probably give it an 8 or a 7.5 in terms of quality. But this episode, not very good villain, not a very good storyline. The guest cast was good. Sharon D. Clarke as Grace was wonderful. I did love her this season. I really wish she'd stayed on as a companion. I mean, just if she got rid of Yasmin and had the Doctor, Grace, Graham and Ryan having really good fun TARDIS team, and maybe like the Doctor's this crazy aunt, I really think I would have preferred that as a season rather than having Yasmin, who didn't really have much character to her, and in this episode we begin the trend that Yaz is always sidelined. But yeah, not the greatest season premiere, didn't leave the greatest taste in my mouth, and it's kind of rewatchable. I have rewatched it a few times, as well as the time I rewatched it into making this video. So I am only going to remove half mark because I did give it 6.5. So I'm going to bring it down to 6, which is on level with, in 5th place, The Battle of Ranskoor AV Kolos, or Avkolos. I put this one in the halfway point of the season for a reason. It's written again by Chris Chibnall, so it is relatively poorly written. Although I would argue this probably was his best episode that he wrote, because there was also a great guest cast here all around. I did love all the characters, and while Tim Shaw, I did grow to think he was a bit more intimidating and slightly better of a villain in this episode. I think this is what slightly puts this episode above The Woman Who Fell to Earth, because it's basically the same quality in terms of storytelling and the impact it left me on the end of the series and so on. But it's still there. While I'm not going to look it down for rewatchability, it's just how this feels so forgettable as an episode. I realised, because this episode, this is the one of the episodes I haven't rewatched because it only came out on Sunday for me. I don't remember much about it. Not much happens at all. It doesn't feel big and bombastic. Also, I noticed the score. it's not as epic and impactful as other previous seasons' finales. And this is the one episode of the season where I hoped it would be big and impactful, and I really hoped Sigan Akinola could have shown his colours up here. But it just felt like the series ended with a whimper rather than a woo or a bang or a pow or a biff bang pow everywhere. And instead we just got Tim Shaw has returned, one of the weakest villains of the series, and he's made slightly stronger as a villain and slightly stronger as a character, but he's still only one Stenza. It's not a big, massive Stenza threat or anything. It's just a ever so slightly bigger version of the Woman Who Fell to Earth. The arcs are an interesting concept, and so is the idea of stealing 5 planets, which is also kind of played off of the Series 4 finale. But there was no build-up at all for this episode at all. There was no build-up to Tim Shaw returning, except in that second episode. And the ideas that I personally had for the finale being the story of desolation, and what I genuinely thought it would be, and it was so close to being that. I really felt like Chris Chibnall would have struck gold if he'd gone with that idea, and instead he went with this, which is the most disappointing episode because I expected so much more from it as a season finale. Yes, it's Chris Chibnall's best episode he has written for Doctor Who, but by hardly a smidge. By hardly a smidge. That is what makes this episode so underwhelming and so disappointing. And while it's enjoyable, it's just so disappointing as a season finale. So I have knocked it down a point to 6 out of 10, which is kind of unusual because I only watched it on Sunday and I haven't rewatched it since. It's just that impact that I felt since I watched it, the fact that I haven't felt as one of the things I always feel after a season finale is that I'm sad that there isn't another episode for a while. For this episode I feel kind of relieved because I didn't want another episode from Chris Chibnall. And while I do look forward to the New Year's Day special because it looks like we may, spoiler alert, be getting the return of the Daleks, but it just wasn't very... I mean, apart from the Daleks, if it wasn't for the idea of the Daleks returning, and if that doesn't happen, that probably will end up being quite a disappointment too, in the New Year's Day special. Apart from that, the New Year's Day special doesn't actually look that good. While it looks interesting and an intriguing story plot, it does sound like it's going to be a bit of a drag. Personally, the idea of something being buried on Earth, the DNA or something. I swear, if it's just the DNA and there's no actual DNA of a Dalek or DNA of an Ice Warrior or Whirrin or something, or a Zygon or whatever, or oh my god, if it's a Stenza, if it's the DNA of a Stenza just an episode out from from Tim Shaw's big return, I will be incredibly disappointed in the New Year's Day special. But yeah, I guess we'll have more to talk about the New Year's Day special when it actually comes out, including the fact that it's moved to New Year's Day, which I'm not entirely a fan of. And it's not for the reasons you'd expect. It's not because it's a New Year's Day special and I'd far rather have a Chris Chibnall, a Christmas Day special. It's for the it's one of the... There's a behind the scenes reason for why I have a distaste for the fact that Chris Chibnall has moved it to us, to a New Year's Day special. Because I do agree the Christmas specials are a bit bad, and there aren't any terribly good ideas left. But there is a behind the scenes reason which I'll get to on New Year's Day. When I review the episode, I will get to the reason then, because it's quite an important reason. But yeah, 6 out of 10 for the Battle of Ranskoor Av Kolos, and that is number 5. And in 4th place is The Demons of the Punjab. We're getting into the slightly more positive part of this video, with the episodes I start to like more. My main problem with this episode is its rewatchability factor and the fact that it doesn't have a compelling villain or anything to this episode. And I think this is an episode that's an example of this season being the most like a classic Who season in terms of structure and storytelling. And even without a classic villain appearing, it feels more like a classic series than any of the Moffat seasons. And he clearly desperately were trying for it to be like a classic series, and sadly his ratings went the same way, rather than his storytelling. But yeah, this season has felt more like a classic series of Doctor Who, and this episode is one of the reasons why the villains are actually turned out to be good. which I do like that concept. We don't have it that much in Doctor Who. It has happened a couple of times. It has primarily happened in Classic Who, which is why I made this comparison. I still like this episode, even without the compelling villain. The set location, the location filming in Spain was good. We got to learn more about Yaz, which is always good because I do like Yaz as a character. When she's in an episode like this, when she actually gets stuff to do. I know I made it quite unclear that I don't really like her. And outside of this episode and Kablam and the later episodes of the season, she is really sidelined and doesn't get much to do. She also doesn't get much to do in episodes 9 and 10 when she's sort of sidelined again. But it's this episode and the Kablam episode that I think her character really works, and she shines in those 2 episodes. So her performance in this episode is good. This episode is one of the very few episodes where the companions do feel evenly spread out, which is good. The guest cast is good. There is some good writing, but I think out of all the ones I rated 8 after the series, this has been the one that's been most rewatchable. So I have brought it down to 7 out of 10. This is the only one I actually rated 8 from the 3 that I rated 8 to be demoted, actually. One has been demoted down to 8. I'm sure many of you will probably be able to guess what episode that is by the end of this video. But yeah, this episode is quite interesting. There's some nice interesting concepts put forward. The partition of India is quite an interesting topic. It's not something that's really covered in schools, really, as I've noticed. I have never learned about it before, and I don't think it's on the curriculum either in history. I'm sure if I asked many of my history teachers, they wouldn't know much about it either. But yeah, so it's quite an interesting topic because it's something people aren't really teaching about. I think one of the ideas of this series that I have liked is the fact that Chris Chibnall took historicals global, which is good because the only historical that isn't in a foreign country was the poorer one, which is the Witchfinders. It's nice to learn because you get more original ideas. I mean, Classic Who sort of dibble-dabbled in like international history, like it's the Romans and a couple of other stories. This episode really does well in that setting of the partition of India. Yaz has a great dilemma. Her mum, her grandmother as well is quite an interesting character. The whole feud between Hindus and Muslims is quite interesting because I linked into what I'm doing in RE at the moment. I'm about to have a test on RE tomorrow, so you know. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I have revised for my RE test, just saying. I did a nice revision poster. But yeah, it's nice to learn about that. Nice moments thrown in there, particularly with the Hindu marriage. But yeah, I'm going to say 7 out of 10 for this episode. And in 3rd place, or is it 2nd place? Yes, 3rd place, sorry, 3rd place. In 3rd place is Takes You Away. Now this one I have put down here mainly because of, again, how the story plays out when you rewatch it. This one is by far one of the most interesting one when you're rewatching it, because the first time you watch it, you're scrambling through for clues what's going to happen, and it's a compelling story, really interesting. Then of course you get to the scene with the frog, and it's slightly left on a sad note, and maybe you're not drawn so much to rewatch it because you're left with a bitter taste in your mouth because that scene, although it is an interesting concept when you really think about it, the Solar Tract. And it's one of the most interesting story plot devices and one of the most well-written episodes of the season. It's still not the greatest in terms of rewatchability. I think this series is really hard to rewatch overall, so it does suffer from that problem again. Particularly if you're like a long-time fan like me, or if you're just a fan who just dibble-dabbles in Doctor Who, just watches the odd episode and you don't ever really rewatch them or buy the DVD box sets, then this season's fine for you. It's all happy and dandy. But for fans who are going to go rewatch this episode, this is going to be a series that, in my personal opinion, I will grow to dread rewatching. I think out of all the seasons of New Who so far, this is one of the ones I'm least likely to buy on DVD. I do currently own all the seasons of New Who on DVD. I think eventually I probably will get around to getting it, maybe maybe in the near future, probably in the long future though, in long term, because it's just not worth the money to me really, particularly when they have to fork out something like $39.99 per season, and it's just not worth it. It's slightly better when you pay like sort of for the parts, the 2-part sets, but we're not here to talk about DVD box sets. We're here to talk about, of course, this episode, which is a good episode really. In total, you have a nice guest cast, and there are some things about the fact that the dad was slightly mistreated, in my opinion. Maybe he could have been, like, if it had been any other doctor, I think the doctor would have been more understanding. Also, I don't like the fact that the dad's issues, the fact that his problems coping weren't built up properly, and the doctor just did not care. It's like, you ditched your daughter and didn't even give him time to grieve or some kind of leeway. Like, yes, what he did was wrong, but the doctor was just plain right savage to this guy. With no form of leniency or understanding or tolerance. She's just like, you ditched your daughter. And yes, that's not a good thing, but you don't need to run around shouting, screaming and having a go at him. She didn't shout or scream, it's probably an exaggeration, but she was really harsh to him. It was quite, you know, you can, like, if you just said, your daughter's waiting for you, what the hell are you doing here? And being more understanding when he finds out that his wife is there. You know, just be a bit nicer. And then of course there's that frog scene. And that combined with the rewatchability factor, I have knocked it down a point from 9 to 8, and I've also knocked it down a place, as I did claim in the actual episode review that it was my second favourite of the season, and since we passed Ranskoy Ave Kolos, it probably should be, right? But no, because in second place is Kablam! Yes, Kablam. I actually found this episode is actually more enjoyable on rewatch. Which is quite good. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I rewatched it that it kept the magic of the episode itself. It's really a nice, fun, watchable episode. Really enjoyable. It's got all the qualities. It's a magical, fun story. The guest cast is good, and I'm more forgiving towards the guest cast in it on rewatching it, because you know what you're in for. And while I'm not going to give another point to this episode, I'm going to keep it at 8 out of 10 because it's still so fun to rewatch. It's such a fun story, fun writing, fun music. The score in this one is my favourite score. The visual effects are nice. The robots look cool. That twist, you know, the twist with it turning out that Charlie was the person behind it all again. It's still a bit cringy and still poorly executed, I would argue, and still quite lazy in my opinion. But it still works. It's just a nice, fun episode that I'm sure we'll remember for years to come. It's probably one of my favourite of Whittaker's reign, probably the end of this reign, because it doesn't look like it's shaping up to be the greatest of eras. But in first place is, of course, honorary first place, and you all know what it is. It's, drum roll please, Rosa! Yes, the best episode of this season is the third episode of this season. And it really surprised me because at this point I really was looking forward to future episodes in the series, specifically written by guest writers. And while the guest writers did stand out, of course, above Chris Chibnall, particularly as seen in my ranking, it still amazes me that Rosa was still able to stand out amongst all those other episodes, as I hoped and thought it probably would do when I got to the halfway point of the season, because it just stands out. It's such a brilliant melody. It's a melody. It's a song. It's a song of a story. It's one of those ones that will be rewatched forever. One of the best I think we've had in 10 years. It's so enjoyable, so rewatchable. I've rewatched this episode more than any other episode. It's also a fun historical, great global commercial business. I know a lot of people, American viewers, dropped off after this one. To be honest, maybe I would have if I'd been American, because it is slightly offensive if you kind of get my gist. I mean, I know that there were white people supporting black people during this difficult time for them, particularly in America, and I'm surprised they didn't decide to showcase that. Maybe if they were going to do that bit, they could have had some white people who do want to help the black people because I know that was one of the major criticisms for this episode, is that it wasn't completely and utterly accurately portrayed. But nonetheless, Rosa Parks is a great character. She's not a character, she's a real historical figure. My sister didn't know anything about this character, and she's so believably portrayed and by Yvette Robinson, and it's such a great episode. She's one of the best actresses I could have thought to play it. I thought she's a bit of a weird choice, but she really paid off as a character and as an actress. And this episode, one of the best directed, best visual effects actually. It felt so new and brilliant. The score really worked on this episode. Of course, that song choice at the end of the episode really gave it that really proper 21st century feel to it. This is one of this is the closest we've had to a pure historical in ages. I love pure historicals. The moment on the bus, by the way, is actually tear-jerking. It's one of the very few scenes. There are like 5, maybe 3 scenes that have made me cry in Doctor Who, and this is one of them. Such great dialogue given by both the Doctor and Rosa Parks. The Doctor is at her best in this episode. I think Jodie Whittaker really works better under other writers rather than Chris Chibnall. It's just so great episode. Yaz gets something to do. The companions feel evenly spaced out, and I really hope Mallory Blackman returns for another episode next season, because this was just wonderful. It's just such a meaningful hour of television. So memorable, and there was just so many great moments, so many key aspects of this. So I really want to, it's just one of my favourite time periods as well. I know a lot of people are going to say I'm biased because of that. It is one of my favourite time periods, and I just love this episode so much. I hope a lot of people remember this episode, because it is one of the best, in my opinion, of the show. And there's just so many great performances, so much great writing. It's just so great. And it really feels from the heart from the writer. She really means this episode. It's great. It's so loving and brilliantly attentive and well held together and really fun. And just, I love it. It really stands out across all other episodes. I really, really mean this. If you have to watch any of the episodes of the season, just watch this one. Watch this one episode and you will fall in love with the show. It's just such a great episode. Maybe don't watch the rest of the season. Maybe just wank this on because you're interested. Just watch it. This is a great episode. I love it, and it just stands out so much to me. It's just so great. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. But yeah, now we move on to an interesting topic. What my favourite aspects of the season were. What my least favourite aspects of the season were. Some of the main seasons, what to do to improve season 12, and where maybe I would total ranking of this episode of this season.